Welcome everyone to the This Week I'm Into podcast, and this week I'm into Major League Baseball. I'm your co-host Pete Tyler. Later on in the episode, we're having a mutual friend, John Bullock, join us to talk about his experience with the MLB. But right now, I'm with my friend and co-host Paul Imbragulio. Paul, how are you doing?
Doing well, Hans. Ready to hit this one out of the park.
I knew that was coming. Let's make this a home run, man. Let's make it a home run.
Perfect.
I was thinking of anything you could say, and I was like, I knew
There's only a couple.
That. Yeah. It's way better than let's make this a line drive. All right. But, Paul, let me set the scene for you, all right? You can close your eyes if you like.
Okay.
Get really imaginative here. All right. You're a big Mariners fan, obviously. You step inside the elevator, and someone says, "Oh, hold the door. You hold the door open. They say, "Oh, I'm actually new to baseball. I don't know baseball at all, but I see you're wearing a Mariners hat. Why should I root for them?" You have an elevator ride worth of time to answer. How do you pitch the Mariners?
You say, do you like pain and suffering?
Are you a masochist?
Do you like almost making the playoffs a bunch of years in a row? Mariners for you, baby. I feel like you could say that with so many teams, but yeah, it's tough out here.
It's a rough landscape for the Mariners.
Yeah, man. Well, you're claiming that I'm a Mariners fan, which I am, but I'm a pretty loose fan in the sense that I don't root for any other team. But man, it's one of those teams that's never been good. Well, that's not true, but they haven't been good for a long time since I was like really little kid, like 2001, right? It was that big season. They got a bunch of wins. So in my living memory, especially like at those young formative ages, they were not the team to be rooting for.
Well, okay, that's fair. They were good at one point. They just never got the World Series.
Yeah.
So.
But I mean, like, since I was like 4, right?
Yeah.
As early as I could remember, which probably isn't even 4, they haven't been like, really contending for, the hype moments are when they're about to make the playoffs, right?
There's always next year, Paul.
So, yeah, I'm not as deep into the baseball lore as you might think I am. I love going to games and I love watching baseball live.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the sport, but I do not keep up with like professional baseball.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Well, that will make our guest later on a little more interesting for what we'll have a lot of good questions for him.
More interesting than me. Yeah.
Well, Paul, can you give your best shot though? I mean, we have some listeners who are not in the United States who might not be familiar with the MLB. Do you want to help out and say, what is Major League Baseball? To the best of your ability, what is the structure of Major League Baseball?
Major League Baseball. We'll do a quick TLDR. All right. Major League Baseball teams. There's 30 of them. Split between 2 leagues, American League, National League. There used to be a bigger difference between the two in terms of they had some funky rules. Now there really isn't. Within each of those leagues, there are 3 divisions, each consisting of 5 teams. If you're a top, 2 team in your division, you can go to the playoffs, and that playoffs culminates with the World Series. Why is it a World Series, you ask? It's because there's a team in Toronto.
It's not, the United States series. It's the World Series.
It's a World Series because we're better than Canada.
There's one Canadian team. Hey, there used to be 2, right? Montreal Expos, but
that's true.
Yeah, not anymore. So thank you, Toronto. Big shout out to you guys. But yeah, like you said, I mean,
was that super helpful?
Very helpful, right?
Basically, like every other sport in the United States kind of works. They all kind of work exactly the same way.
Yeah, so come on, Europe. Ever heard of a postseason? Not really. I think European sports are structured actually so much better. But
hey, man, you gotta be there on the last day of the season.
Yeah. All right. That's fair enough. But anyway, Paul, I'm a big Cubs fan, as you know. For the past 2 years, go Cubbies. I lived about I don't know, Paul, you visited 8-minute walk to Wrigley Field. Yeah. So last season I went to 11 games. I was super proud of it. I thought they're so much fun. But I'll say, same scenario. If I'm in an elevator wearing my trusty good old Cubs hat and someone says, why choose the Cubs? It's because I think we have the best victory song in all of baseball.
Go Cubby Wubbies. It is a fun one.
We say, go Cubs, go. Go Cubs, go. Hey, Chicago, what do you say? Cubs gonna win today. That's really all you need to know.
Yeah, but you can't sing it ahead of time.
No, right. We only sing it if we actually win the game.
Yeah, I like to call them the Cubby Wubbies.
Yeah, Cubbies. We love the Cubby Wubbies. Paul, what's kind of your experience with Major League Baseball?
You know, as much as the next guy, I grew up playing baseball basically my entire life, so go to a bunch of games every year. And I've been to a bunch of different stadiums as well.
Yeah.
We can talk about that later. But yeah, anytime me and my dad are together in a new town, like we'll look up a baseball game, see if we're gonna go to it. Mariners are my hometown team, but I've probably been to just as many games at like the A's stadium because we got family down there. Been to a bunch of Mets games. I'm just a fan of the sport.
Okay.
More than a specific team.
Oh, so are you bummed that the A's are moving to Vegas then?
I'm not bummed, especially because I don't really have too much family over there anymore. But their fans in Oakland, some of the most fun fans. I went to an Oakland A's versus San Francisco Giants game.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
And it was rowdy to say the least. Like in
I'm
Oakland.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. You definitely saw a couple like people bumping into each other, like really close to starting fights. I'm sure there were some, maybe not near me. I was pretty young at the time, but
yeah.
Those are fun. I love those like hometown rivalry stuff.
Yeah, 100%. I was able to go with you, Paul, to big rivalry, Cubs versus White Sox.
Oh,
so,
true.
You know, the two teams based in Chicago. Me and Paul, timing just worked out perfectly that Paul was visiting that week. And so White Sox were visiting Cubs, so we went to Wrigley Field. And it was, atmosphere was good.
Dude, we got a walk-off, too.
Yeah, and we got a walk-off at the bottom of the ninth. So, yeah, I mean, that was so much fun. Like,
yeah, thank God the Cubs won, too, because that would have been...
yeah, that would have been way worse.
Yeah. That's when hands start getting thrown. There are no such thing as a White Sox fan, though, so that's okay.
Not lately. I think White Sox fans are kind of in the shadows because White Sox had a historical year last year in the sense that they became the worst team in the history of baseball. So, yeah, I think White Sox fans are waiting for a new hope, a better tomorrow. So, but I mean, my experience with baseball, I mean, I grew up in Idaho with no pro sports. And to be honest, I actually didn't really know baseball that well until I actually moved to Chicago. And slowly but surely, because I was in Wrigley Field, I was so close to the stadium, I started going to a couple games. And there's nothing like going to a game in person. Like being the fan experience at the stadium, I absolutely love. So I slowly, surely started going to more and more Cubbies games. And I just, oh my gosh, I just absolutely fell in love with the Cubbies. I am now like a diehard Cubbies fan. So I went from absolutely no baseball to I'm full on Cubs now.
Hans, I think the key thing about baseball, and you know, there's some diehards that love watching baseball on TV. I think it's pretty hard personally to watch it on TV, even though I like watching baseball like slow, right? And there's a lot of downtime, which I do understand. But when you're like at a game, you know, if you're there with like a buddy, right, all that downtime doesn't really feel that bad because you're just like chit-chatting, talking smack.
You got a hot dog and a beer, like
exactly.
That's totally fine.
The other thing too that I love, and something that my dad and I have always done, is we have always picked a player that we just obsess with over the season. And like I'm saying, I barely know any of these people, but it's always people with funny names or funny nicknames. So the Mariners, as of recording this, just got this new guy announced, and I think his name is like Mastroboni, which obviously is just ripe for good jokes. I won't explain why, but you're getting it. So, you know, we just like have like a player every year that we pick, and just like, you know, normally they're not that good, right? We just rag on them. Not even like in a mean way, just like because it's fun.
Yeah. I mean, also, Paul, do you know where you got Miles Mastrobroni from?
Oh, I do. He is from the Cubs.
He is from the Cubs, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Funny that you're choosing him, though. I mean, because of the name.
Yeah. Well, no, that's why. Like I said, it's all just like for fun, right?
Yeah. It is all for fun.
I have no idea if this guy's any good, but I do love his name.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll root for him. Like he came from the Cubs, so yeah, I'll give him a shot. Paul, I also wanted to ask you. You brought it up earlier, but it's a huge goal for people, a lot of baseball fans, right? To visit every single of the 30 teams, every single stadium, right? There's even like scratch off maps you can get where it's like
Yeah. Wait, how
every
many have you
single
been
team you
to?
visit, yep, you check mark basically. So I was curious, how many baseball parks have you actually been to?
Okay. Sorry. Let's rattle them off real quick. I'll try to cut this out or make it really quick. From the top, I've been to the Mariners, San Francisco Giants, Oakland A's, Dodgers, Angels, Padres. That's 6. Then we got Kansas City, St. Louis, Cubs. That's 9. Then we have Nats, Pirates, Yankees, Mets, Red Sox, Orioles. I don't think I've ever been to Philly. That's
Okay.
15.
That's 15.
15
You're
out of
halfway
30.
there. That's pretty impressive, man. Did you have a
Yeah.
favorite stadium?
Oh, I have a lot of opinions on this. Yeah. I'd say my favorite stadium for a holistic game is the San Diego Padres.
Okay.
Lovely weather, beautiful view on center field. I think that's something that a lot of stadiums try to do is they try to build their center field into like a view of something, city, landscape, whatever. I think the Padres do it really well,
Okay.
and their food is really good.
That's a big thing for the fan experience, I feel. The
Yeah,
food.
yeah, yeah. Their food is really good. My other two, like 2 and 3 in no particular order, I think the Pirate Stadium is really cool because the
I've heard.
ambiance is great.
Even though that's a divisional rival for the Cubs, I've heard the Pirate Stadium is actually pretty beautiful.
very-
So
yeah,
I can
it's
give
very
them that.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, San Francisco is also pretty cool, but just because I
Mhm.
like that it's like close to the water, the food
Yeah,
is really good.
yeah.
But other than that, oh, and the view is pretty solid if you sit up high.
So for context, in San Francisco Giants Stadium, if you hit a home run over to right field, right?
Field.
Yeah,
Mhm.
then it goes out of the park. It will land in the bay, and then there's a bunch of like kayakers who hang out right there. And like whenever out of the park home run is hit, yeah, they scramble to pick up the ball out of the water. So, Paul, your stadiums far outnumber mine. So I was thinking about it. I only have 5, both of the parks in Chicago included. So Wrigley Field and Comiskey Park are now called Guaranteed Rate Field, but what a weird name. My very first game I ever went to was at Safeco, which is in Seattle, but is now called T-Mobile Park, I think, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw
Well, to be
Ichiro
fair,
Suzuki.
Hans, and I don't count these. I count them based off the team, not off the specific park. Because technically, when I was like 2 weeks old, I went to the Kingdom, which was the predecessor to Safeco,
Mhm.
not in name, but a different building.
Yeah.
So I still count 15 because since they changed stadiums too much, like I'm not gonna count that I haven't been to the new Oakland Stadium.
Yeah, no, I don't think you have to. I think that's fair. I've been to Dodger Stadium and I've been to Coors Field. I think out of all, well, I'm super biased, so Wrigley Field number 1, of course, but close second. I actually really liked Coors Field in Denver. I think it's a good
It
stadium.
looked cool. I wish I had gone.
It's a very neat stadium. I also love that like they kind of have the background of it being such a high elevation that there's like more home runs there because it's just easier to hit the ball out. So there's more home runs in that park because it's like the air density is lower, so the ball just flies off the bat. So I think that's kind of a fun part of that park. I do have some fun facts for you, Paul, if you want to hear. You want to hit me with a tune, or?
Take me out to some fun facts. Take me to fun facts with Hans.
Thank you. That was beautiful. That's what made me my favorite rendition yet. Paul, when I was coming up with these fun facts, I want to just kind of have some fun with it. So instead of my regular fun facts, I made a little game out of it for you.
Okay.
So I'm going to tell you 2 facts, all right? And one of them is real, one of them is made up, and you're going to have to pick out the one that's real, okay?
All right.
All right, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
So you've said you've been to the Padres and you like the Padres. So here's fact number 1. This one is about the San Francisco or San Diego area. 1. San Diego Padres once had a chicken as their official mascot. Or 2. The Oakland A's once had an alligator as their mascot named Chompy.
I think the Padres mascot used to be like a person, but now you got me confused. I want the alligator one.
The Chompy thing is something I just made up. I thought it would be
Just
funny.
see, you're
call it
asking me which one is
Chompy.
true, but it's just like it sounds more fun.
Well, the San
This
Diego
game is
Padres did have a mascot that was a chicken known as the KGB chicken. If if someone said lay one on me, the chicken would lay an egg out of its like leggings. That would contain like a little prize for whoever said that. It was a fun little thing the Padres did. So I don't know, fun background, I guess.
okay. I was thinking about the Padres' old logo, which was like a monk with a baseball bat. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that they had a chicken mascot.
Like a Spanish missionary, like a literally
Yeah,
a padre. A
well, yeah,
father.
that's why I was like, it's not. That's why I didn't think it was that one. But I guess
Yeah.
mascots are not always related to the name of the team.
That's true. Okay, Paul. Here are your options. This one's about. I think baseball contracts are fascinating. This is
Mhm.
about a player trade. So a player was once traded for 10 pounds of popsicle syrup, or a player was once traded for 10 pounds of catfish.
Probably catfish.
Yeah, you got it. It's catfish. But wouldn't it be funny if someone was like, not even full popsicles, just traded for popsicle syrup?
I didn't even know what popsicle syrup was. Dude, it's like that scene in Moneyball where they trade the dude and they're like, I want you to stock like my vending machines or something.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
I wonder if that kind of stuff is real. I guess.
I mean, yeah, apparently someone was traded for catfish. So here's the story about this. This was Ken Kragenbuhl. Sorry if I'm messing up that pronunciation, but anyway, he was a Chicago Cubs pitcher. He had riddled with injuries, 4 arm surgeries. He was 30 years old. He was traded to the Pacific Suns, which is an independent team in the Western League. And at the time, the Suns were very much the worst team in the league. And this guy, Crane Buell, was begging for a trade, basically. He didn't want to be on the Suns anymore. He kept asking to be traded, and specifically, he wanted to go to Greenville, Mississippi. So this is, back in the wild west of 1990. So the Pacific Suns wouldn't trade him. So one day he just like gets on his car and he's just like, screw this, and he just drives to Greenville. Like, contract be damned. He just leaves. But anyway, the Pacific Suns and this team in Greenville, Mississippi are basically just trying to come to an agreement now. He's like, the Greenville Bluesmen is the team there. And they're like, all right, Crane Buell's just like doing his damnedest to come to Greenville. So Pacific Suns are like, okay, well, what can we do? Well, here's like an offer. How about you, Greenville? You guys raise catfish. How about we trade you this guy for 10 pounds of catfish? Greenville says, all right, we'll give you 10 pounds of catfish. So here's 10 pounds of catfish. Small sum, nothing really to mention, but small little bit of money. But it was mostly about the catfish. And they're like, all right, here's a new contract. Yeah. Like, all right, that's, I'm sure that wouldn't fly today. Or I don't know, maybe these independent leagues are, still trading for catfish, but he was like, all right, 10 pounds of catfish. I'm on Greenville now. So I don't know. Interesting story. Apparently he was pretty mad about it too. But like, what are you gonna do? Like, you got.
Seems
the
like
trade,
that guy has issues.
Yeah, I think he might have. How do you feel about that, Paul? Would you be happy if you were traded for 10 pounds of catfish?
Well, maybe if I was traded at all, that might be a good thing.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, one more for you, Paul. I want to give you the option. This is an under-over. The longest game in baseball history is under or over 8 hours long.
Gotta be over that.
Can you imagine being in a stadium for longer than 8 hours?
If it was a day game, maybe, but I don't know what their policy is on drinks because they normally end it in the 7th, and I don't know if they extend it if it goes into extra innings.
That's a fair point. But the longest game in MLB history was played on May 8th and 9th of 1984. It was between the White Sox and the Milwaukee Brewers, and it was at Comiskey Park in Chicago. The game lasted 8 hours and 6 minutes. It was 25 innings long. That being said, that's actually not the record for the most innings. It's just the record for the longest game. And the White Sox won that game 7-6.
Yikes.
Yeah.
At some point as a coach, you're just like, hey man, just walk them.
I'm tired. Let me go home.
Yeah, you have to play a game the next day. Like,
Yeah. Anyway, Paul, that's all the fun facts I got for you. Little game this time, but you did well.
I went over half on this one, so I'll
Yeah,
count it as a win.
good job, good job. Paul, do you have any resources you want to hit related to Major League Baseball?
Sure. Here are some things that I think I would recommend for people who aren't super into baseball or are looking for a cheaper alternative, because sometimes, unless you're going to the White Sox where you can get like a $10 ticket, which is pretty rare, or if you live in an area like Idaho, which probably doesn't have a major league team,
Nope.
I highly recommend going to minor league games. So when I was living in Durham, North Carolina, that's where the Durham Bulls from the movie play. They're not a movie team. Well, you get the point. They're a minor league baseball team, AAA, and they feed into the Tampa Bay Rays. And you could get tickets for $10 and you could sit basically in the front row. And minor league games, bunch of fun. They're a lot more interactive with the fans than major league because they're much more low budge. So you can just like go onto the field for like every inning, every like in between inning game. Yeah, and it's kind of cool when you get to see like these dudes, the best guy on the team every year, like make it to the majors and like follow them. So when I was I saw the Rays play the Mariners and I got to see Josh Lowe, who's like their big superstar on the Durham Bulls play. So that was super fun.
That is fun. Okay. I love that shout, Ball, because I think one of the most fun parts about MLB is being in the stadium. And if you can go to a minor league baseball game and like be super involved and like sit in the front row, like that just sounds so much fun to me. So I love that shout.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it. And it's much more accessible to the average person. So I was literally telling me that one year we went, and I think the last 2 weeks, or I think it was like the last like 10 days, you could get $5 tickets, and I went like 8 times. I would literally just like show up. I'd probably sit there for a couple innings, and then whenever I'd get bored, I'd just walk home because it was like across the street from my house.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was like for $5, like why not? Like you could literally go and get a hot dog for cheap. Be good.
So if you want to get involved, if you want to sit in the front row for cheap, go to a minor league game or a White Sox game.
Dude, well, yeah, because they're everywhere, right? Because, well, they're shrinking down the minor league system a little bit. But yeah, I mean, there's way more like, even in Seattle, 20 minutes up the road is like a single A or short season, whatever A level team, the Aqua Sox. And they're fun, right? Like cool. I got my dad's birthday on a shout out, you know, when we went there for his birthday.
Like on the billboard?
Yeah, they're just, well, no, they just like were like on the microphone. They're like,
oh, no way.
Happy birthday to you. Just because they're like, why not? Like,
that's awesome. Yeah, that's fun. Okay.
Yeah, me and the other like 1,000 people that were there. Okay. So it was pretty good. Dude, the other thing, which I feel obligated to talk about, is the Savannah Bananas.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah.
So now that they're playing at major league stadiums, I feel like you have to mention it. They're like the Harlem Globetrotters for baseball. I've been to 2. Totally recommend. I think their prices have increased to $35 a ticket. That's tax included. So super cheap. And it's just like 4 to 5 hours of just like nonsensical fun, like Harlem Globetrotters antics. Like I saw a dude on stilts hit a home run, or not a home run, but like he ran the bases. Just like complete nonsense. People like catching balls behind their backs, doing TikTok dances, or whatever the hell's gonna, whatever hell takes over from TikTok at the time of release. Rip TikTok.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. TikTok.
But they're just, yeah, super fun games.
So if you're looking for intro alternatives to watching baseball, those are things that might come closer to your house.
Yeah. Savannah Bananas are like super fun, and they just do like really silly things. So I like that shout. Paul, I also wanted to, I did this last season while I was in school. I absolutely loved it. But whenever I was studying and there was a Cubs game on, if you just look up Cubs radio online, you can listen to the game while you're studying. And I actually enjoyed that. So I'll give them a shout. Maybe not for everyone, but it was
it's good because it's slow paced and like it's not that hard to listen to, especially if you're like following something else. Yeah, man, whenever my dad used to make us do yard work, he'd always have that on the radio.
Yeah, I love that.
Sports talk.
But yeah, anyway, I think that's all the resources I have, so I can't wait to hear what our guest has to say about Major League Baseball, so we'll bring him on after the break. Welcome back, everyone. Joining us now, we have our mutual friend, John Bullock. JB, so good to have you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, guys. Thank y'all for having me.
Me too, JB. So, if you wouldn't mind, just give yourself a little introduction and what you're here to talk about today.
Yeah, my name's John Bullock. I went to college with these two goobers over here. Been longtime friends of theirs. But I'm really excited today to talk about baseball. I don't get a huge platform to chat about my favorite sport all the time. So when you guys asked me to come on, I had to take my opportunity when I get it, you know?
Absolutely. JB is probably the biggest baseball fan I've ever met in my life. So I think this was actually a no-brainer for me and Paul. So yeah. But JB, could you kind of just give us a little background about like how did you get into it? Why do you find it so interesting? And what your kind of experience is with it now?
So my love of baseball comes from liking the Dodgers so much, and it's been passed down through my family for a long time. We had a house in Vero Beach, Florida, which is their spring training site, kind of like a preseason site if people are unfamiliar with baseball. But that's where they go to train in February and March in the winter before the spring season starts. And so my dad would take me down there for posterity's sake because we sold the house before I was born. But go to like 6 or 7 baseball games, go off from the beach. It was just like the best time ever when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. And I just fell in love with it. And I guess from there, I don't know, it's such a mathematical and statistically involved sport, and I love anything that has to do with math. And I think it's such a really deep sport that people don't really realize that it has all of these little nuances that I think is so interesting to me. And it's continued to keep me interested all the way up until my 20s. It doesn't help also that the Dodgers are now one of the best teams in all of Major League Baseball. They finally fell into money, and I'm just so excited.
So you have to be invested.
You just set the record that you're a fan before.
Yes,
like,
please,
joined
please.
Before, yeah.
I do not call me a fair weather. I'll lose my top on that.
Yeah, wait, that's so funny. Yeah, that's the flip side of when your team becomes so good. It's like you have to make sure, like, guys, I liked them before they were good.
Look, there's proof of me as a child.
Yes.
I've got the whole, like, you know, me and my brothers sitting on the bench in front of Dodger Town as 3-year-olds, like putting our little arms around each other. The whole shebang. So I got proof. Believe me, I was a big Dodgers fan before they got good. Hopefully, we gotta like put a picture up or something, man.
So JB, I got a hard hitting question for you because I asked Paul before this too. I asked Paul to, like, in his best elevator pitch, to try to sell the Mariners, like why you should be a Mariners fan, and I kind of did the same thing for the Cubs. I think it's only fair I would give you the same platform to do the same thing for the Dodgers. So,
oh man,
in your best elevator pitch, why should someone be a Dodgers fan?
God, this is so easy.
It's too easy right now. If you asked 10 years ago, I would think I would have a whole lot. Maybe 15 years ago, I'd have a lot harder of a time doing it. But our team is incredible. I think that right now they are probably the number one team in terms of the money spent, the way that the farm system is developed, and you know, just how quality of an organization it is in terms of it's so well run top to bottom. And I think that they've just fallen into money in the last 10 years, and that's allowed them to even shine more than what they were previously. They have perhaps the best player to ever walk the planet in Shohei Ohtani. So if you're interested in just incredible stardom, there's that. And they also have a lot of really interesting, I guess, ragtag like teams or like players from the past that were really, really bad for other teams, and then they got developed by the Dodgers just randomly. Max Muncy, Chris Taylor. Chris Taylor has kind of fallen off in recent years. But they have a lot of really great turnaround stories as well. So there's anything from insane stardom where they go out and spend $700 million on a player to players that they just pick up randomly and they turn into stars themselves. So you can't really beat like Southern California baseball either in the summer. I mean, it's just so beautiful out there. So the stadium's great, the team's great. We're a great team. It's really hard to not sell them right now, and they're so poised to win championships for the next decade, perhaps. So if you want to have a winning team and a fun team to root for, can't really go wrong with the Dodgers.
With the biggest star in baseball right now, and the biggest star in recent history, probably too. So. Yeah. I think you did a good job selling them. I think they are a pretty easy team to buy into right now. So I can definitely give you that.
Yeah, man.
Which is, it's really funny because I've gotten lucky enough to host JB a couple times in Chicago the last couple years, and our conversation always goes like this. It's like, "Hey, Hans, I was thinking about coming out to Chicago. Like, what? I would really like to visit." And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And you're like, "Okay, how does this weekend work?" And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, that works great." And then the response is always, "Oh, I think the Dodgers are in town that weekend." I think the Dodgers are playing the Cubs. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've got to enjoy a couple games together. So that's been really fun, including one at Dodger Stadium too.
I'm still waiting for JB to come visit me because those are the exact same texts that I got him when I moved out to Seattle, from him when I moved out to Seattle. And then most recently, because I was wondering when JB would be here next, and I just looked up the Dodgers schedule in Seattle, so it'll be September 26th to 28th.
That's when I'm coming, man. it's my baseball tourism. And if you want another sell on baseball, there's a million games to go to. So it's super easy to just pick your team in different cities and then go out and see all of your friends. It's not that I wouldn't come visit y'all, obviously,
I know.
Otherwise. But it just makes
but
such a great excuse.
We understand that you have an ulterior motive.
No. It's an excuse. I want to come see y'all. For sure.
Yeah, no. I'm giving you a hard time, JB. Of course.
So wait, JB, speaking of baseball tourism, how many different stadiums have you been to? Because I think Hans said 5. I think I've been to 15.
Yeah, I think
I've been to more.
No, I'm right there with you, Paul. I'm exactly at 15. I just hit 15 last year, and man, there's so many. Have they all been
Dodgers games?
No, so I go to sometimes just random ones. My first time at Fenway, it was a Red Sox-Yankees game, and that was really, really incredible.
Ooh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's like historic rivalry right there. But, like passing through cities too. Like I went to the Cardinals stadium, Busch Stadium, which was really, really pretty as well, just on a road trip randomly when I was actually with one of our other mutual friends, Eric, just passing through on a road trip. So, I sometimes will stop by, check it out. I mean, they're all so interesting and have so many different characters to them too. That's what makes baseball stadiums so interesting, is that they're all different dimensions. I think I don't know if y'all talked about that at all, but it's pretty crazy that you can have some stadium that's 420 feet to center field, and then the next one is only 380, or whatever. That's just throwing numbers out there. It's not specifics, but it's pretty incredible.
Well, it's like the Green Monster, right, in Fenway. It's like, what is that, like 310 feet, but it's also like 50 feet high.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they used to have hills in like the Houston Stadium. That was kind of crazy. They had light poles and hills in the middle of the center field for a while, and they finally got rid of that.
I didn't know
that. I thought that was so dangerous.
It's pretty crazy. So there's always been pretty weird stuff with baseball and their stadiums. I could talk about other historical ones, but we don't need to get too much into that.
It is really interesting that there's not like a standardization, and like I think that I'm with you. I think that's actually really cool that every stadium is like fairly unique to the team that plays there. But speaking of stadiums, I wanted to ask you, JB, about kind of me and Paul were talking. We love going to the baseball game, even more so than watching it on TV, right? Like we find it very special to actually be at the stadium. So what is it about going to the stadium and the fan experience that MLB provides that is so amazing to actually be in the stadium watching the team?
Yeah, I think this is probably the biggest selling point for most people. Even if you don't love watching baseball, I think that a lot of people just enjoy going to the ballpark, getting a beer, getting a hot dog, lounging out, because they're especially historically, there's been a lot of downtime in baseball games, and they've been trying to kind of move away from that. But I think that the nice part about it is that you can just watch the game, enjoy it, but you can also have a conversation with your friends. It's kind of like a nice way to, even if you don't like the game, you can go out and have a great time just hanging out with people. And I think that that's kind of the big sell for a lot of people if you don't love baseball that much, and you can watch somebody hit a home run or run around the bases a bunch, even if you don't know what the heck is going on. So it's still really exciting, even if you barely know the rules or that kind of thing. I think that the understanding of the rules probably helps people when they're going to games in general. But yeah, I think that mostly it's just the vibe that everyone likes, is that hot dog, the sun beating down a little bit, you're sweating a little, but you're liking it, you know.
Oh yeah, especially in Southern California. But
True,
April
it's
in
only 70
Chicago is more
degrees
of a
there.
crapshoot. So
True.
yeah, JB, I'm totally with you because I think the first couple times I went to a Cubs game, I was just going to like kind of hang out. It's fun to just be in that atmosphere. But the more games I was going to, the more I was learning about the rules and buying into specific players too, and that just made me love it more and more. And now I'm like really into it. So I think if you start going, it's super fun, and then you start learning players, you start learning rules. I think it only makes the experience better.
Yeah, absolutely.
JB, so speaking of another thing that you talked about why you like baseball, you talked about stats and kind of like the numbers aspect of it. Are there any specific like aspects of that? And I don't know if you want to talk about like how stats kind of like change how the game is played, or if you're more interested in player stats and kind of like keeping up with who's got like the best spin rate on balls, things like that. But what part of it do you find most interesting?
It's pretty insane that over the course of history, they've also changed kind of what's been more important as time has gone on. I think is the most insane, like ridiculous thing. You'd think that, for any other sport, it's like, oh, someone can run this fast, shoot this many points, and there's obviously multiple facets to that. But over time, baseball's statistics have evolved. So it used to be that, this guy can hit for average, has a bunch of home runs, maybe he's a good player, kind of more in their name. And if we've ever seen the movie like Moneyball, that movie does a great job of explaining kind of the revolution that happened where they started looking more at on-base percentage and slugging percentage, which have now become, I guess this is more specifically hitting, but both of those statistics account for the most important statistic in all of baseball. So it's called OPS. This is probably not what most fans know. So they'll look at it and they'll be, oh, he hits for 300 average. He's probably a really good player, but he might just be getting little hits. So I guess I could explain what on-base percentages and slugging percentages to help maybe give some context. But on-base percentage is basically how often you get on base. And that's every single time you come to the plate, whether or not you get to first base or not. So it's total plate appearances and total number of times you get on base, like total number of times divided by plate appearances. Otherwise, then you have slugging. Slugging tracks how hard you hit the ball and how much pop you have. So slugging percentage is the number of bases expected for you to have when you come up to the plate. So if you're slugging something really good, like 0.5 or 0.6, that means that you are going to get half a base every single time that you come up to the bag or come up to the plate, if that makes sense. So you put those two together, it tracks how often you get on base and how hard you hit the ball. And if you're doing both of those things in kind of like an even manner, then you're a really good baseball player.
Yeah. And for reference for the slugging thing, the reason you can get half a base is because like a single is worth like 1,
right.
A double would be worth 2, a home run would be worth 4. So when you average it out, you can get like a half a base. Exactly.
So anyone who's slugging over 5, 6 and on base percentage of 3 or 4, if your OPS is above 0.7, 0.8, you're a really, really good baseball player. So if you ever see that stat, you can kind of know who's really good. So 0.7-ish is kind of average. 0.8 is really good. 0.9 and above 1,000 is really, 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 really good. So in case you're wondering about these random stats, that's the one you want to look at.
Okay. That's the big one.
That's the big hitting statistic.
Just curious, do you know any idea where Ohtani's ended at the end of last season?
I think he was above 1,000. I think it was like 1089 somewhere in there, maybe 11, like 1.1 somewhere in there. He was slugging like 1.2 for a while, and then he had a little taper off. But
which is insane. Like you can expect a little more than a base every time he comes up to bat. Like that's an insane stat to have.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's absolutely nuts.
So how have you seen like that stat or like other stats kind of like change how baseball has been played? I know we like recently they're updating rules about the shift because people can kind of like track where people tend to hit it and things like that. Do you like those kind of like implementations with the stats, or are you kind of annoyed that they're changing the rules on them?
I love that you bring this up. I think it's really, really great for the game, all these rule changes specifically. Statistically, I've definitely seen some evolution since I was even a kid. They used to have a lot more unathletic players that could just mash the ball and didn't have as much of a, I don't know, athletic build. I think that's where people kind of get the notion that a lot of baseball players are really like unhealthy, not very athletic. And nowadays, you don't really see as many of those people anymore. Like the Prince Fielders of old, you don't really have as many of those unathletic people, because you have to have people that play defense really well, because you can't just like shift everybody. And they also made the bases larger, so it puts more of an emphasis on people who can steal bases. And the pitch clock also helps regulate, I guess, speed of the game, and also allows people to steal more. So speaking as a baseball fan, I think it's awesome for the game, especially just getting more people involved. I think that it helps bring more people in, because you're not going to be sitting there for 4 hours necessarily. You're only going to be sitting there for 2.5, and there's more steals, there's more hits because of the lack of shift. And I think that's great for the game and growing it in general. But as a purist, I'm obviously a little upset about it, because I'm more along the notion of, I'd love to go sit and watch a baseball game for 4 hours and holding runners on for 30 seconds at a time. And like the 9 players should be able to be put wherever the heck they want, just because that's always how it's been. But yeah, I think it's good for the game.
It brings more excitement to the average viewer then.
Exactly. Yeah. More people to talk about baseball with, right?
There you go.
Yeah. He's just looking for someone who's willing to go with him.
That's right. Always.
That's great. JB, you brought it up a little earlier, so I kind of wanted to circle back to it, but you mentioned the farm system, and that's like something I'm not super familiar with. I've heard of before, but would you mind explaining like what a farm team is for a Major League Baseball team?
Yeah, sure. So Paul's pointing to his hat right now, but the Durham Bulls are, I think, they're a AAA associate of the Tampa Bay Rays. So I can kind of dive into the way that the farm system is set up. But basically it goes, the majors is what you want to get to, obviously. That's the Major League Baseball. That's all the teams that you know and love, probably. And then you've got all the rest of the teams in these smaller cities around the country where they have deals with these major league teams where they'll say, you can take this certain number of players. We'll give you some sort of monetary compensation sometimes. It all depends on kind of how the contracts are set up. But basically all of them are affiliates of one of the 30 major league teams. So anytime you see these random like Tulsa Drillers, like Chattanooga Lookouts, any of these teams that you just see randomly in different cities, they're always associated with one of the 30 teams, and they're broken down, and there's multiple different divisions, but there are kind of 3 main ones. Once it gets down to the bottom one, they even break it out more. But the next level below Major League is AAA. So you'll move from AAA to Major League, and then below that is AA, and then Single A. And Single A has rookie ball, high, advanced A. There's a lot of different classes when you get kind of down to the bottom there, but mostly you can just think about it as going from Single A to AA to AAA, and that's kind of how players are developed. If you're a really good player, you'll jump straight to AA, like work for a few years, maybe jump to AAA quickly, and then the major leagues after that. So it's a very long process to get all the way through the minor leagues, typically, unless you're a superstar and you just run through it. It does not happen very often at all. Even with the people that they draft out of high school, they still develop them for years in the minors. So when we're talking about farm teams and how well a team is able to have a good farm program or a good development program, it's super essential. I mean, I can give a plug for the Dodgers specifically, but
sure,
their farm program has always been excellent. Even if they trade a lot of their prospects away, they end up still having one of the top 5 farm development programs in terms of finding prospects and developing them. So it's both not only finding these players, but also making them better in your system. So it's pretty interesting in terms of some teams have really great farm systems, but don't have the money to kind of back it up. So they'll develop these really great prospects and then have a couple years where they're really great. Or you have the Dodgers where they develop really great ones and then can retain them because of their contracts that they end up having. So it's really a complicated process, but very interesting.
So is there a kind of more or less the general age for where you're peak baseball player? Because if I'm a young guy, right, who gets drafted, I'm not going to the majors right away, like you were saying. I'm probably landing in AA first, maybe if you're good, or maybe even Single A. So how old do you expect me to be when I'm actually playing baseball at the top?
That's a great question, Hans. It totally varies from people because it's hilarious you'll see rookie players that are 30 and they show up in the league and they dominate after developing for years in the minors, having no spark whatsoever. Or you'll have guys that jump at 22 or less than that. I mean, Juan Soto was a huge star and won a World Series before he turned 21. So you can have different levels of stardom, I guess, that pops up over time. But I would say in general, a MLB player's career peaks typically around 29, 28, 30, somewhere in there. It's a little later than most sports, I think, just because of the way the baseball isn't quite as physically demanding. But yeah, typically you'll, right out of college, I would say you're like 22, and then you can work your way through. And if you're a good player, you'll probably make it by 25, 26. If you're like a really good player. If you're still developing, it might be later 20s, that kind of thing. So Hans, there's still hope for you. You're in your prime baseball years right now.
Playing.
Look, guys, look ahead. When I turn 30, that's my rookie season.
That's right. We're looking for you at Wrigley.
Catch me at Wrigley. Catch me at the World Series that year. That's perfect. JB, I also want to ask you, I think the money aspect of baseball is really interesting. I mean, obviously there's like billion dollar franchises, but two things I wanted to ask you, like if you wanted to maybe dive a little bit into what the contract situation of a baseball player looks like, and I kind of wanted to know your take on luxury taxes and deferred payments.
Yeah, no, I expected this question.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
It's such a great question to ask, especially now. If you look on social media right now, I guess to kind of preface this, right now, specifically my favorite team, the Dodgers, has worked on a lot of these deferred payment programs, is what Hans has just mentioned. But maybe I can back up and kind of explain kind of how contracts work at a basis first before we kind of get into current events. Mm-hmm. So, so baseball contracts are a little different than most other sports. When you're signing an MLB contract, your money is almost all but guaranteed. So if you go out the next day and you shred your arm to pieces and you lose it, if you're a pitcher, you're still getting paid your like $400 million or whatever it is, if you're a stud like that. Obviously, I'm sure they have some insurance for something as ridiculous as that. But most of the time, they do have to pay people out. Steven Strasburg is a great example. He's a hometown Nationals guy. He had a couple really, really great years, signed a huge contract, blew out his arm a couple of years later. It happens with pitchers a lot, I would say, more so than that kind of thing. But then they still had to pay him every single year a whole bunch of money when he couldn't do anything except coach. I think they eventually cut him a deal where they bought out most of his contract. And didn't make him come to the stadium just to sit there and talk to people. But it's for whatever, $50 million or $40 million a year or whatever it was. But yeah, so there's guaranteed money a lot of the time, I think, is what's the most interesting about and different about baseball contracts. There's no salary cap at all in baseball, which I think is also a pretty contentious point. And the way that they are able to mitigate that is they have what's called a luxury tax. So Hans already brought that up earlier, but basically there's a certain amount of money you can spend, and up until that point, there's no extra charges or anything. But once you hit that certain number, I don't know exactly what the number is, but once you go over that, then they start taxing you and making you spend even more money than what you are. And it's then distributed back across the rest of the league who's not above the luxury tax. So it's basically like you're throwing money back to your competitors in order to acquire these really awesome players. The Dodgers are typically pretty over that number, based off of the spending that they had. Just a bit. And in the past, and I feel like in the last couple of years, they've done a little bit better of a job. It was actually the late 2010s where they were really kind of going crazy with it. And what helps with mitigating luxury tax is those deferred payments that Hans mentioned. So I can kind of go into how that works, but basically tell
us about Shohei's contract.
I was going to say, that's the number one contract that you want to hear about. So when the Dodgers signed Shohei, he agreed to take deferred payments way past his contract. So the Dodgers signed him for a $10 years, $700 million deal. this deal is going to be paid out instead of 10 years, it'll be paid out for over 20. And during the first 10 years, he will only be earning $2 million a year for the time that he's playing. And then he will be paid the remaining $68 million out across those next 10 years. So it's really like a $700 million deal over 20 years instead of 10. So not only does it help the Dodgers because they don't have to spend $70 million a year on this man. They only have to spend $2 million while he's playing and then $68 million later per year. But it also helps Shohei because the Dodgers can then go spend more money on other players that he can surround himself with to go out and win World Series championships. So it's a pretty contentious point right now because everyone is a little upset that the Dodgers have been able to finagle so many of these deals. Shohei is not the only one that they've actually been able to do. Mookie has about $100 million. Mookie Betts is another famous Dodgers player, but he has $100 million deferred. Will Smith has, I think, 40 or 50 million. One of the Dodgers catchers. So there's a lot of players on the Dodgers specifically that have a lot of deferred payments, and a lot of people surrounding the league are a little upset about this. And obviously I'm biased, but in my opinion, any team can go out and do this if you want to. You know, you can go out and sign a player and say, hey, I'm going to pay you $1 million for the next 50 years. Most of the time, players don't want to do that. They want their money now, and they want it like in cash, cold, you know. But the difference is that the Dodgers organization is so, I think, like well run that a lot of these players just want to go out and win and go out and give their GM a chance to get better players and spend more money in general.
I imagine what people are really worried about, especially for their organization, like the Dodgers might be okay because their cash flow is so high. But if you're like a less well-funded team, I mean, you end Shohei's first 10 years and then you're completely sunk. Like you have no chance of being a viable team for the remainder of that 10-year period. So it's kind of like, are you willing to bet all your money now and hope that it works out? And for the Dodgers, they might have enough money to front, continuous good teams after that first 10 years, but you're definitely running at such a cash deficit.
It is. And I think what's kind of the most annoying part about everyone's complaints surrounding it is that every single team has a billionaire owner. These people are worth billions and billions of dollars. And to say that your team can't spend this money is kind of ridiculous. There's a couple owners that are pretty bad. For instance, the A's owner, that when they just got rid of Oakland, which is really, really sad, but it's kind of a tangent. But all these owners can spend this money, and it's funny that the Dodgers get so much hate because of it, just because they're like not necessarily gaming the system, but working on the system in their favor when these other teams could be doing this. Of course, now Shohei brings in the entire country of Japan, which helps mitigate their revenue loss by a lot. I mean, I saw a report last year where Shohei actually brought in exactly $70 million more, just him specifically, of revenue for the Dodgers. So they've already mitigated his $70 million loss, quote, just by him existing on the team, according to this report that I read. But
yeah, and they're certainly going to make more money off of that in the 10 years that they don't have to spend it.
And the time value of money as well. $68 million in 10 years is not $68 million right now. So lots of pros.
Off of that, I just wanted to ask, so if I'm hearing this correctly, are the Dodgers going to be really good for the next 10 years and then they're going to be so sunk in owing cash that it's going to be hard the 10 years after that?
So it depends. Paul is right. It really depends. The way that our GM, like Andrew Friedman, talks about it, he's a little worried about it, but he's not too upset about it. You know what I mean? In terms of if you are able to set these payments up correctly and you know that it's coming, you just kind of plan for it ahead of time. And the Dodgers are already so cash rich now anyway that they should be able to afford it in 10 years unless things have completely drastically changed. I think it just depends on how well the team's revenue streams increase or decrease over the next 10 years and kind of where they're looking at after the Ohtani era, if you want to call it that. Like how many championships we win in the next decade, I think will also probably have a big push on it, and whether or not they want to keep throwing money at players or just, be happy with winning a few World Series in the 2020s. But I think that, Andrew Friedman, the guy that is the GM for the Dodgers, he's a really, really smart guy and wants to continue to have success regardless. I don't think that they're worried as much about stringing every single cent out of consumers of MLB like a lot of bad ownership groups too, which is kind of, I think, the problem really, which I could get into as well. But I think that there probably needs to be some sort of floor instead of a ceiling, in my opinion, to make a lot of these GMs like spend money and actually make a team instead of just making a $60 million roster and then turning over $120 million in revenue and keeping it, which a couple of these teams do, which is sad.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of talking about league minimums too, right? Like,
Yeah.
What is it? Like $1 million a year is about the minimum. I mean, it might not be the actual floor, but yeah, on average.
$750K.
You know what's interesting, just as a side note, do you have any thoughts on like how hard it is to move up to the majors? Like, do you know much about the contracts for minor leagues and how much those guys are making?
Oh yeah, it used to be really bad. If before you got to the majors, if you're a minor league baseball player, unless you're a high paid AAA player, which is really rare, sometimes a lot of these people had to do like extra jobs, that kind of thing. They've improved the pay a ton, so a lot of these farm team players don't need to be doing like a second job. But back in the day, you were really paid like less than probably like 50 or 60K originally, and then I think they've kind of upped it. I don't know what the farm minimum is nowadays and what the contracts are, but they've definitely improved the pay for a lot of these minor league players. But it is really, really hard to make it to the majors in general. You have to be standout, especially if you're in a farm system like the Dodgers. You're stuck behind Shohei Ohtani, Freddie Freeman, and Mookie Betts. You know, if you're like a first baseman in the Dodgers organization, you're not going to be coming up to the league, or like a DH.
Yeah, you're hoping you're getting traded.
Yeah, exactly. If you want your shot.
Mm-hmm.
So
JB, we could kind of switch a little bit. I know we talked about logistics a lot, and I think logistics are super interesting, but I want to get like your personal experiences with baseball too. So first thing I want to ask you is, have you ever done the 999 challenge?
Oh man. You know, I've been a longtime fan of this. I've seen it on social media all the time. And I have not done it, unfortunately. I think also this is another con of me being a purist. The pitch clock kills it, man.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I think
so tough.
If you had a long game across like 3.5, 4 hours back in the day, that's no problem. You know, I don't know if Hans has already explained this before, but 9 beers, 9 hot dogs. Content. Yeah, so it's basically the challenge is you have to eat 9 beers, eat 9 hot dogs, drink 9 beers, and in the course of the 9-inning game. So you should be averaging 1 hot dog and 1 beer per inning. So back in the day when baseball games lasted 3 to 4 hours, you know, that seems pretty manageable, you know. A couple beers there, a couple hot dogs there. It's still a challenge. Sure. Yeah. But nowadays games average 2.5 hours. That is a little rougher on your stomach for sure. I would be willing to try it sometime. Absolutely. Maybe at home, perhaps.
Oh my God. I don't think that's... So here's the problem with the thing at the stadium, right? One is the lines. You need a runner. You need someone to get you all of your food and drinks. Because it takes like...
You just have to buy like 3 hot dogs and 3 beers.
You can only buy 2 beers at a time at most stadiums. Oh, so you need someone to go and get you all of your beers. Because it also takes about an inning, more or less, maybe a half inning to go get all your food, like per run. Okay, but so I don't think I could ever complete that challenge. But if you had to do just the hot dogs or the beers, which do you think you could do?
Oh, that's a great question, Paul.
I feel like the beers got to be easier. I think calorie-wise. Also, if you don't have anything to wash the hot dog down with, it's just going to get gross real quick. You can also have a beer,
but if you had to do just 9 of one or the other.
Yeah. I think I got to go with the beer. Mainly, I just think I think the hot dogs are just gross.
I could do the hot dogs. I don't think I could do the 9 beers. I mean, I would get way too drunk with 9 beers.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Doing it at home is like probably the only way you can do it nowadays, because beers at the ballpark are like $20. You know, like you're gonna be costing you a fortune.
Yeah, well, and they're all like the tall boys.
Yeah, so it's not really mathematically the same. Like 22 ounces, is it really 2 beers or just 1? You know?
No, it's 1 beer.
Yeah. So yeah, see, Paul knows the 22 ounces is 1 beer.
We'll go on a dollar dog night.
Yes. You got to find a game in Seattle for that.
I'll be your runner.
Yes. We'll have to report back
I
later
think-
on the podcast.
I
How badly I fail.
I think I'd make it through 2.5 innings, and then I'd be like, "All right, guys, like you're cut it out, cut it out." I think I actually had a friend do it in a previous guest on the podcast, but I won't name names. But who was doing it at a White Sox game, and it's a little more affordable at the White Sox stadium actually than most other stadiums, but still, it's a thing, right? And I think he got through like 5 beers and 4 hot dogs, I think, and then he called it quits. But I thought that was pretty impressive. So
Yeah, that's pretty good. I do wish that I could have tried it when the old rules were still there. And if you hit like a long game, I think it's like doable. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If you that 4.5 hour game
Yeah.
when it used to last.
You
that
just got to
long.
chug a bunch early and then pace yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Good strats.
JB, do you have a particularly fond memory or anything that really sticks out of being at a baseball game?
Oh man, I mean, I've been to so many over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I think I need to like think about this for a sec.
Here's one. I'll say something while JB's thinking that's going to make him
Sure.
mad. I've been to a lot of baseball games, right?
I know it's coming.
And I pissed my dad off.
I'm
with this
so
too. My
mad.
dad's a big Dodgers fan. So we were all in LA, all of our buddies, including JB. And we go to a Dodgers game, my first Dodgers game. And, you know, I'm already like crapping on the Dodgers, just being a huge pain in the ass, right? Ethan, one of our friends, is a big Dodgers fan. JB, you know, super mad that I'm just giving him crap all game. And that specific game, the Dodgers did not get a single hit the entire game. Like they got no hit against, I don't even know who it was, but it was just
against the
an
Cubs.
against the Cubs. It was an
It's against the
absolutely
Cubs.
abysmal showing while I'm ragging on them the whole time. And I just remember at the end of the game, like, I don't know if like everybody we were with, like either was a big baseball fan and noticed, but I'm like on the edge of my seat. Like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, I've never seen a no-hitter before and it's happening against the Dodgers. It was a great time. And they were good that year too.
Oh yeah, the funniest part about that whole thing is they won the World Series the year before, and I was so excited to take all of my college friends to a baseball game, most of which don't care about baseball or had never even been to a game practically. And then
Yeah.
my favorite team just gets no hit, like probably one of the best teams in the league, and it's still probably one of the most historic moments I've seen. I can go more of a recency bias for my story.
Sure.
But I did get to go to the World Series this year, which was an unbelievable experience. And I think that while Paul's story is really, really funny and also very historic and probably was perhaps the most historic game I'd seen before watching the World Series this year, I got to see Freddie Freeman hit a walk-off grand slam to win game one. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It was an unbelievable experience. And I was with my dad too, so we were hugging, you know, the whole thing. It was full circle moment. So
What is that atmosphere like at the World Series game too? Like, is there a tension in the air or like what? Yeah, you're shaking your head like
it's just packed. There's a lot of people there. Is I think more
Yeah.
so the vibe. LA is a little different too because it's the energy there is not quite the same. Like the stadium will get into it, but a lot of these people are just there for the clout or that kind of thing. So you'll have less passionate fans a little bit of the time, which
I
is
think
tough.
that's a case of a lot of like World Series, Super Bowl,
True.
stuff like that.
I didn't find it to be all that different, besides obviously just the stakes in the game. But I think like in terms of the atmosphere, like I mean, I saw 2 incredible games and both of the like high points were crazy. So I mean, people were going nuts. People were hugging, screaming, crying when the Dodgers ended up winning the game off of a walk-off home or grand slam. And that'll go down as the most historical moment in my lifetime, probably for the Dodgers. And it's crazy that I got to go see that. So that's probably my favorite memory. I don't know if it's recency bias. I probably could have come up with something better, but it's really hard to beat watching your team hit a walk-off grand slam
That's a good
in the
one.
World Series against the Yankees
Yeah.
too. Everyone hates the Yankees. If you want a plug to not like a team, but
All right, so we all 3 of us pitched our teams, and then here's why you shouldn't root for the Yankees.
yes, exactly.
Well, I think everybody knows why you shouldn't root for the Yankees, but I think that the Dodgers are going to become that, right? Like
Yeah.
the Yankees just being historically good.
Yeah, it's the same in almost every sport. Like once a team starts getting good, then people start hating them because they're good.
Yeah, which is the Dodgers now.
Yeah,
okay.
we'll be
Sorry,
the new
JB.
evil empire. I'm happy to take on the role of Darth Vader of the
I know,
league,
right?
you know?
When you're already a fan, it's like, yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, bring it. It's not like I'm bandwagoning. Just bring on the hate. We'll love it.
No, that's facts.
Okay, I just wanted to ask about stadiums because you've been to 15 now, so you've had experience at least half of them. What's been your favorite stadiums, and what makes a stadium better than a different stadium?
Oh, that's such a good question, Hans. You guys really got some hard hitters.
We're hard hitting, you know?
Yeah. I think in my experience, the top stadium I went to is I think Fenway for sure. No doubt. Dodgers is a close second. Then that might also just be biased.
That's so biased. That's just so much cope. I won't get
we'll
into
see,
this,
man.
but
I don't know.
It's one of the objectively like just the most mediocre stadiums.
No, it's
Of
historic.
the current era. Historic doesn't make a good stadium, but okay, sorry, we'll move on.
I think that the history does help actually make the stadium, contrary to what Paul's saying. But I mean, Fenway's the oldest ballpark, and I think that I love feeling the history there. More so, I think being able to be on top of the field is probably the coolest part about Fenway. It's such an old stadium that they built it where there's basically no foul territory, so all the seats are kind of just on top of everything, which I really like from that standpoint. And the energy there is great too. It's just very, very nice looking. But yeah, I think just like general amenities are always really nice in any ballpark. Like the Dodgers have added this little center field area where they have like a fire truck, all their World Series rings from years past. That kind of stuff is really cool. Some of my other favorites, oh man, there's so many. Wrigley is really great too, Hans. I really enjoy that one. It's yeah, you built the stadium, right?
Yeah,
Chicago native.
That was all me, actually. That was all
That's
me.
crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, I think that in general, just the atmosphere and the amenities are really cool. I think that if it's even if it's like a really nice stadium but doesn't have quite like the feel, it's not quite what you want. I've been to Globe Life Field in Texas, and that one is a really, really nice stadium. But it doesn't have quite the same quintessential ballpark feel, even though it's brand spanking new 2020 builds. It's just kind of like in a hangar, so it's not quite as baseball-y, but it's still really, really nice. But I think that everyone kind of has their favorites and least favorites. Like I don't really like Petco that much. Also, perhaps baseball bias because the Padres are one of my least favorite teams. Yeah, Paul's shaking his head over here.
I told Hans that's my favorite stadium.
He did say that was one of his favorites. So.
The reason that I'm not as big on it is I don't think it's as pretty as some of the other ones, and kind of the downtown area is a little sus in general, so it's kind of hard to like separate them in my mind. But yeah, it's still a fun stadium for sure. I had a good time hanging out there, but I think it was more like it was overhyped to me. Like a lot of these people are like, this is like objectively these are the top ballparks, period. And like I really liked the Giants stadium in Oracle in San Francisco, and I really don't like the Giants. So there's at least some
Okay, there we go.
We're
being
some
fair
teams
here,
we're being fair. Yeah, I mean that's like on the bay. You've got seagulls flying through the air. You can hit the ball into the bay if you want. If you hit it hard enough.
If you asked for it.
If
you asked for it hard
enough.
I did not see one hit into the bay when I was there, but
I've never seen one either.
Yeah.
Funny enough.
It's a rarity, but it's cool when it happens.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for being fair there, JB. I think it's important to, not be biased. But anyway, I think Wrigley is the best field. So,
JB, this is a really important question to me. All right, where do you buy tickets when you go to games? Do you have a favorite place to sit?
This is such a great question. Oh, I thought you were gonna ask me like all my like ticket hacks. I was like, I don't.
Well,
have a
you can
ton.
give ticket
let's
hacks
take that
for sure.
too. Yeah.
No.
But like, where do you like to sit? Well, he's gonna say something illegal, so maybe don't.
No. I won't plug anything illegal. I typically go through like normal routes. At Nats Park, they used to have this thing where you could get in for $5 if you showed up an hour and a half early. So all you had to do is just go up to the ticket office and be like, "Hey, I want to get in for $5," and they would put you in the worst. They would put you in the worst seat, and then I would just sit wherever. I'm totally joking, by the way. This is not actually what I would do, but you know, for legal sake, but I would go like sit like behind third base or whatever.
Oh, like once you get in. Sure.
Once you get in, yeah, you sit wherever. They've really actually upped security in the last 2 years at all ballparks that I've been to, so it's much harder to kind of sit wherever. And
I think you just have to go after the fifth, and then you're good.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But I think my favorite place, like everyone loves behind home plate, and that's where all the expensive tickets are. But I think the better view is like if you're sitting on kind of like the third baseline, maybe even up a couple rows, but being like right behind the dugout is, I think, like one of the coolest spots in all of baseball to watch, because you get the flight path, so you can see where the ball is going off the bat from the angle that you're sitting at. But you can also, you're so close to the field that you can see these like incredible plays by like a third baseman. If somebody hits it super hard at the third baseman, makes a diving play, and then whips it over there, you're right next to the action. So you get best of both, being able to view the game really well and also being kind of in the action, if that makes sense. So yeah, definitely my favorite.
Love the insider tips here. All right, it's not about behind home base actually.
No, I think those are the worst seats.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I like right field, like shallow right field, and then the baselines, like near the dugout.
All right, there you have it. You heard it here first.
It is kind of fun watching from the outfield every once in a while, like you were saying, Paul. Just from like being able to see if the umpire is really screwing up, because from third base you can't really see as well.
Yeah, it's just nice to get different views of the game. And honestly, like to JB's point, like most games, like I'll sit in like 3 different spots. Like I'll get a cheapo ticket up at the 400 level, and then make my way to the outfield when security's lower.
And this is all joking. Like, yeah.
No, that one I don't mind.
Okay,
that doesn't feel illegal. That one doesn't feel illegal.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you. JB, if you wouldn't mind, this podcast is about picking up a hobby, a new passion every week. So why should someone get into the MLB? Give us the elevator pitch.
I think there's no more exciting time than as in this year right now. As dumb as that sounds, and as big of a fan as I am, it might sound a little biased, but you've just had all these rule changes come through that are making the game faster, better, more entertaining. That in and of itself, I think, is like a great pitch, because I think a lot of people were dissuaded by the pace of play, and it's done wonders to improve not only, you know, the timing, but also the play itself. You get a lot more steals and a lot more home runs, a lot more hits. Well, maybe not home runs, but, you know, hits in general because of lack of shift. That, and you also have some of the like greatest stars to ever walk the planet, and, you know, Shohei Ohtani is a great example, but, you know, Juan Soto just signed a massive contract. He's going to be really, really fun to watch this year for the Mets. Lots of really great international pitchers too. Like the Dodgers just signed Roki Sasaki from Japan on a minor league deal. Nonetheless, dude throws 102 miles an hour with a ghost forkball. Is just an insane pitcher at the age of 23 or whatever he is. So there's like a lot of really, really good players that are just kind of coming into the league, and a lot of really, really great players that are at their prime right now. So it's hard to not like want to get involved with it, just because there's so many cool stars, so many great moments that will happen this year, especially if you're a Dodgers fan. But people might be arguing that baseball is ruined right now, but I think that's what makes baseball so beautiful, is that it's an extremely variable sport. This is not like the NBA or NFL where, you know, there's like a 14-point favorite and that team is basically guaranteed to win unless it's an insane upset. The mighty Dodgers can lose to the Chicago White Sox any day of the week. Maybe not 3 out of 4, but, you know, like any game, anything can happen. And I think that's what makes baseball so beautiful. So I see something new every single time I go. So if that tells you anything, and I've been to hundreds of games probably, or maybe at least like 50, tens of games. Hundreds is a lot.
tens of games.
Tens of tens, sure.
Yeah. Great. Yep, that's a great pitch, JB. And now if you could, if you have any plugs, either personal, any baseball media, any Dodger specific media even, that you want to give a shout out to.
Oh man. Gosh, I don't really consume a whole bunch of like baseball podcasts, but blanking on it. There's this one dude that does really cool baseball edits. Oh, this is really dumb. His name is Dodger Nate. He has like probably like 85,000 followers or something. He just does Dodgers edits, and I think it's the coolest thing ever. and is just a big Dodgers fan that has like a little more time on his hands to make like cuts and edits for a bunch of these Dodgers players. So maybe MLB larger wise, like JS 9 innings is also a really great one. He just talks about like stuff around the league, makes it pretty engaging. He also has a podcast as well. I haven't given it too much of a listen, but I like his edits on Instagram. That's kind of where I get most of my, I would say, content for baseball. It's all over the place. So yeah, hopefully those are decent plugs.
That's great, JB. Yeah, we'll have to keep stats. If you're listening, email in that now if you're convinced to be either a Mariners, Cubs, or Dodgers fan. Please no Yankees.
Yeah.
We'll keep track.
Now that everyone's given their plug.
Right, exactly, yeah. Perfect. Well, JB, thank you so much for coming on the pod.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been so fun.
This is great, yeah.
I love chatting up baseball. Y'all rock.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the This Week I'm Into podcast. And a huge thank you to John Bullock for sharing his passion on Major League Baseball. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future topics, please reach out at thisweekiminto@gmail.com. And give us a follow on Instagram at thisweekiminto. Please rate us 5 stars and share this episode with a friend. We're doing our best to grow the podcast, and your help really goes a long way. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next one. Alright, Paul, we gotta rethink how we evaluate players. Batting average, outdated. On-base percentage, everyone's looking at that now. We need an edge.
I agree. OPS, old news. WHIP, please. I ran the numbers, and I think we need to focus on something deeper.
How deep?
I call it RBW+, runs batted in while whistling. Turns out, players who whistle while swinging have a 3% higher contact rate.
That's something. Ted Williams was a whistler. Ever notice Trout's mouth moving at the plate? Probably whistling.
Exactly, but I've got something even bigger. FOSIP.
FOSIP?
Fastening of shoelaces in innings pitched. Pitchers who double knot before the 4th inning show a 12% decrease in walk rate. It's a subconscious stability thing. Clayton Kershaw, triple knotted in cold weather games.
You know who doesn't retie his shoes? Blake Snell. You know who has control issues? Blake Snell.
You're seeing it, but we're just scratching the surface. Check out BLI+.
Ooh, Bubblegum Longevity Index?
Exactly. Players who chew the same piece of gum for at least 3 innings have a .047 higher slugging percentage. It's about cognitive consistency. If they don't switch gum, they don't overthink at bats. Trout, elite BLI+. Harper, he switched off big league chew midseason, and he dropped 30 points.
That explains so much. But what about diet? Because I've been looking into HBP squared.
Hit by pitch squared?
No. Hot dog bun preference per plate appearance. Players who prefer sesame buns strike out 6% less than those who go plain. The added texture improves grip strength, which leads to better bat control.
What about potato rolls?
Elite contact hitters. Joey Votto's a sesame seed guy. Judge, plain bun, struggles with breaking balls. Mookie Betts prefers pretzel buns. Total statistical outlier.
That's game-changing. But I've found even more. You ever track post-rain delay sunglass adjustment rate?
Of course. The more a guy messes with his sunglasses after a delay, the worse his first at-bat back. It's all about overcorrection.
We're light years ahead of every other team right now.
And by next season, they'll all be talking about sunflower seed toss arc efficiency.
Is that for hand-eye coordination?
Bingo. Players with a consistent 35 to 45 degree seed toss arc have faster reaction times in the field. Wild seed tossers have erratic defensive metrics.
Billy Bean had OBP. We've got synchronized cleat taps per plate appearance.
Oh my. Paul, we're gonna own baseball.